PNC is proud to support Business Forward, where local leaders discuss the challenges and opportunities and how we do business in Central Illinois. Welcome to Business Forward. I'm your host, Matt George. Joining me tonight, Jim Rochford, attorney at law at Jim Rochford and Associates, and much, much more. We're going to get to that soon. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Great to be here, Matt.
Well, I'm glad you're here. I wanted you on for, and we're going to get to it, but you have a very, very unique career. You've had a fun career, and we're going to get to that. So let's start off with you. Did you grow up here in Central Illinois?
Yes, I grew up on the East Bluff in Peoria and went to St. Bernard's Grade School and then Spalding High School.
Where'd you go to college? I think it was Loras?
Yeah, I went to Loras College in Dubuque, Iowa.
Dubuque, Iowa. What made you go there?
Well, my dad went there, and actually Don Amici, I don't know if you remember that name.
I know that name.
Yeah, Don Amici went there and was 2 years ahead of my dad at Loras. And, they changed the name of it. It was actually Columbia College back at that time, and it switched to Loras, but same school.
I did not know that.
And then two of my daughters went there, and I met my wife there while we were in college.
Nice. So here you are, you get out of college. I'm guessing, did you always want to be an attorney?
I really did because I always saw the play To Kill a Mockingbird at Cornstalk years ago, and the Dr. Morgan actually played the lead role, and I'd seen that movie, and it really had an impact on me and made me interested in law. And so even throughout high school and college, I definitely was gearing myself towards going to law school.
That's an amazing story if you think about it. If you didn't go to that play, maybe you're not a lawyer.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So one of the things when I was, we've known each other for various reasons over the years, and basketball and sports and other things, but one of the things that I was really intrigued about was, in my past running nonprofits, seeing the ills of society and then seeing good and tough things. You worked at Cook County State's Attorney's Office. And when I was reading this, I was like, I know you're in law school, but you were in the felony division.
Yep. Yeah.
Give me a story. I mean, that is crazy.
Yeah, so basically at 26th in California and Chicago is where the courtroom is. And, the parking lot has barbed wire all the way around it. And that's kind of I got to park in the parking lot, but it was something that I think they felt they needed with the neighborhood. It was not a very safe neighborhood. But, in my case, I got assigned to an attorney who had been an FBI agent. We hit it off very well. I got to prosecute two cases by myself with him in the courtroom. One was a rape case, and the other one was a criminal assault case. And then I second chaired a murder trial with him. But kind of the most noteworthy experience is we had a case where the police were not being honest on a case there, and he had me interrogate half of the police, and he interrogated the other half, and then we went in and reported to the first assistant to Richard Daley, who was the state's attorney at the time and future mayor of Chicago, and finally at one point he dismissed me from the room, and he said, "What are you doing having a law student involved doing this?" He said, "Hey, this guy's not like any law student I've ever seen." He said he asks better questions than I do, and but it was a great experience, and enjoyed it. I did get offered a job, but I knew I wanted to be in Peoria eventually practicing law, and so I really didn't want to go that route.
Think about that opportunity he gave you.
Yeah, it was really a fantastic experience, and just being able, the murder case I second chaired, and this is all while I'm in my last year of law school, was involving a minister that was paying the people that worked on rebuilding his church, and three people came up and shot him and killed him and took over $100,000 cash that he had on him. Yeah.
My goodness. So you had the dream coming back to Peoria. So in 1986, you opened up your own business. And then since opening the firm, I've used your services, and I'm thinking about potential trademarks and all these different things. And you know, there's certain attorneys that have just one specialty.
Yeah.
I'm looking at everything you do and I'm going, wait a minute, you've had your hand in every potential bucket that there is. How do you become so diverse? Just because you can?
Well, yeah, to some extent. I went to a event for Jerry Brady, who's now deceased, but was a Kiwanis member that was in the same club as me, and he got described as kind of a Renaissance man that did just about everything. And frankly, other than Jerry Brady and myself, I really can't think of any other attorney in the Peoria area, at least, that has done the different types of things. But one of the things is I like helping people, and if you know how to litigate, for example, doesn't really matter what the subject matter is. I mean, you can research case law and come up with that, and that certainly has gotten easier with the computerization on cases. But in the end, the only thing that we absolutely don't do, we don't do any taxes or tax returns or anything like that, but we also don't do any individual bankruptcies. And so if I'm in bankruptcy court, which I have quite a bit, I'm there on the creditor side.
I got you.
But other than that, we pretty well will do. And I have 4 attorneys, and we kind of have the one that's the most skilled at an area kind of handle it, or the one that can provide it at the least cost to the client.
Yeah, and you do have that culture, that mentality of you just want to take care of your client.
Yeah, and that's what it's all about. And I mean, frankly, Matt George is knowing how to do service and help others and turn things around from the children's home to other sports things that he's been involved in. So you really have a similar, I think, passion for helping the people you're working with, and that's what we do at the law office.
Well, one of the things, I appreciate you saying that, one of the things that found interesting is that you filed a lawsuit against the NCAA, and that went, in today's world, we'll call it viral.
Yeah.
But that just blew up everywhere.
Yeah, and it was in newspapers all over the country. Frankly, the day of the oral argument in federal court, I got diagnosed with bad pneumonia. My doctor called my wife, who's my boss and my office manager, and why should my marriage be any different, right? So,
right.
And he said, I want to put him in the hospital. And she said, he's got an oral argument today that I'm not even going to tell him that you called and said this because I know there's no way. And so throughout that hearing, the NCAA had 3 attorneys at the hearing. I was there by myself and had to keep drinking fixed formula 44 to keep from coughing, and ended up actually the next day being in the hospital for 7 days with a pretty serious case of pneumonia. And the thing is that I did that on kind of like the side from other things, read every case that the NCAA had filed suit, which was well over 100 back at that time, and so kind of got a feel for the law. And the thing about it is that day, Bradley was like 2-13. So the one thing that we couldn't get overturned was making them eligible for the NCAA tournament. And but they said take that up with the Seventh Circuit, and the Seventh Circuit didn't have a date open before the end of the season for having an appeal, even on an emergency basis. But we did make law in terms of winning some points for the people we were representing, which were players at Bradley that had not even been at Bradley when the alleged infractions had taken place.
Huh. Very, very interesting. It was even in Sports Illustrated.
Yeah, it was in Sports Illustrated, and it had Hersey Hawkins' picture and said he won his case on a higher court, and talked about the lawsuit. And I got my name in Sports Illustrated and not for my jump shot. So.
Oh man, that's interesting. You also served as the Fire and Police Commissioner for both East Peoria and Creve Coeur for several years. But you served as General Counsel for the Peoria Housing Authority. I think that's interesting. Yeah. The Peoria Housing Authority, and all housing authorities, it's a business that most people do not understand.
Yeah, and certainly a business that is needed, and that they do a lot of things. So I was general counsel for 9 years at the Peoria Housing Authority, and one of the things, just an example, I donated Christmas trees, to each housing unit, and then bought decorations and let them decorate the facility for the residents the way that they wanted, and then had a prize of $500 for the tenant council that did the best job, and then had the board go around along with the housing managers, and so bringing the board and the management staff of the housing authority to be the judges, and then I just gave that award out, and that was just something I always believe in, trying to give back and to do things. But one of my experiences there that was kind of a little bit different was that they were doing some drug sweeps, and this was down back when Warner Homes was still in place. And so on a Friday night, the board wanted me to be down there for that. So I show up and I had my suit on, and one of the undercover police officers that was there had been on the Vietnam Moving Wall Committee with me, and I brought that to Glen Oak Park a number of years ago, and had General Westmoreland come in and speak to the school kids in Peoria, and got the chance to introduce him. And he looked at me and he said, "Rochford, what are you doing down here on a Friday night with a suit on?" And I said, "Well, I didn't know what to wear." And he said, "Just stand behind me and stay out of the way." And I said, "Okay."
That's funny. Before we get, I'm going to transition into community service, but I found this pretty interesting. In all the time that you were doing that with the Peoria Housing Authority, you never lost an eviction case.
Yes,
That's crazy.
Yeah, and there were some months where we were doing over 200 in a month at the top of the the kind of the volume at that time. And the thing is that the one thing though that I always remember growing up on the East Bluff, my family never owned a car. During my tenure, I got severely burned when I was 5 years old. Was in the hospital for 8 months and had 35 major surgeries. And so I feel lucky I got the last sacrament of my church because I thought I was going to pass away. So I always look at anybody that I'm dealing with and treat them with respect. So every time a tenant would come in for an eviction, I would shake their hand, introduce myself, say I'm the attorney for the Housing Authority, and thank you for coming to court today. At the end of court, after getting the evictions, I would be walking out with the tenants and talking to them, and the bailiffs would say to me, "We have people sometimes that are kind of chest butting with somebody that they're evicting in the back room, and you come in and you're walking out like you're their best friend." And the reason is that I believe that everybody deserves to be treated with respect, and that's what I always do.
Well, that compassion piece, that thread of empathy and sympathy runs through your whole body. The first time I met you, probably 15, 16 years ago, when you were doing some things with the basketball tournament and so on, and then I spoke at Kiwanis, was you have that thread running through your body at all times. That's just how you're built.
Yeah, and really I think that comes from like my parents, and they believed in the importance of giving back, and we weren't very wealthy financially in my career growing up. We never owned a car until I bought one when I was in direct sales and had to have a car to be able to do my job, and that was in college. And at the same time, I was taught that you give back and you try to help out others whenever you can.
Well, you've got a great family. You've got 3 kids, and you don't even have to say anything to them because they just observed growing up, watching what you've done.
My son, who's now an attorney at my office, he used to, when I was governor of the Kiwanis district, he would go with me on a lot of my speeches. He was a 4th grader at that time, and I would see him in the back of the room kind of marching around giving like my talk, and afterwards on the way home he would critique me and say that I left out this part, so my 4th grader knew my speech better than I did. So
that's how my kids are too. That is so funny, but it's awesome too.
Yeah, it is.
So let's talk about your public service. There's something that you accomplished, and I know you're not you don't want the pat on the back, but I'm going to give it to you because I think it's just amazing. Many distinguished accomplishments, but you served not just with Kiwanis International. You were the worldwide leader for Kiwanis.
Yeah.
How does that happen? And first of all, for people who don't know, what is the mission and goal for Kiwanis?
Yeah, Kiwanis is international. We're in over 80 nations throughout the world, And the thing that distinguishes us from other worthwhile groups is the emphasis on youth. We sponsor programs in the schools, first grade through college. Our marquee program is Key Club, which is the largest youth-led organization in the world, and it's at the high school level. Well, I was in Key Club for 4 years at Spalding, and really I went to a lot of Kiwanis meetings while I was in Key Club of the club that I'm still in, and that is what influenced me to want to come back and be in the same Kiwanis club that had sponsored me in Key Club. And we try to plant the seeds with youth, so when they get out and they're running the children's home or they're a lawyer or whatever they might be doing, they'll still want to give back by doing community service. And we have programs first grade through college. I still go to the Boys and Girls Club on the East Bluff and recognize 2 programs we have in Kiwanis. One is called Bring Up Grades, and the other one's Terrific Kids. And so Bring Up Grades will recognize any student that brings a grade up, can be an F to a D, or like someone like you probably that got all A's. We still recognize that.
No.
And so, but the thing is that it's building self-esteem through programs. Another program called Terrific Kids. If any student does something out of the ordinary, a teacher can nominate them, and then we recognize them as well.
That's unbelievable. So one of the things I like about Kiwanis and what you do is, because you can have any leader, let's say, plug into that position, and you can go all in or you can go, you've seen it both ways. But the thing that's interesting and that I find most important, and this goes not just to our community, we just happen to bear the fruits of what you did, is you're developing young leaders to take control, so to speak, of the next generation of leadership here in our community.
Yeah, and that's really the way it works, is that you have to plant the seeds when people are young, and then that makes them want to be an adult that is still giving back and kind of paying it forward somewhat in the sense of for the next generation. And that model has worked really well. Interestingly, the big 3, and they're all very good organizations, but Lions, Rotary, and Kiwanis are the big 3 in community service groups, and they all have their niche. But Rotary is based 70% outside the United States, Lions is 80% plus outside the United States, and Kiwanis is still 70% in the United States. And the reason is because of our programs in the schools are such a good fit with the school programs we have. And so like I chair a high school all-star basketball game, and have done that now for 13 years. And we have 40 high school seniors from Central Illinois play their last game. For many of them, it's their last organized basketball game they'll ever play. There's a few each year that go on to college, but it's still a chance to have them have one last shot. We give them a jersey with their name on it. We give them a T-shirt that has all the players' names on it, and it's really a nice event.
40 years, so congrats. 40 plus years, Kiwanis. Congrats.
Yes, yeah, and enjoying every minute of it.
I love it.
Yeah.
So you also drafted Peoria's 3rd All-American City Award.
Yes.
That's an honor too.
Yes, and that was a great opportunity. So Peoria won the All-American City in 1954 and 1966, and then the one that I drafted was in 1989. I was close friends with former Mayor Jim Maloof, who's now deceased, and Mayor Maloof I reached out to him and said, hey, I always wondered about the All-American City because I was sitting in church, and my pastor talked about the All-American City when we won it in 1966. And then I did a little checking on it. Peoria had actually applied 4 other times in the 80s, and it was under Mayor Carver's administration, actually I believe his daughter, that had submitted the application. So I got a copy of those applications and kind of learned a little bit on the process, and then drafted it in 1988. Well, they had not made those 4 times the final 30. 30 cities are chosen to be a finalist, and then they make a presentation and promote a booth promoting their community. And so the first time that I drafted in '88, we made the final 30, and Mayor Maloof and I made the jury presentation. Well, at that point, I knew how the written word had gone for what they were looking for, but I sat through all 30 presentations. We didn't get in the final 10 that year, but I learned from watching the other presentations. So the next year, I was ready to hit the ground running, and we not only were one of the 10, but we actually were recognized as the #1 out of all the cities, and got invited to the White House to be presented an award.
Wow.
And
That's
I'd never
crazy.
written about it in USA Today, so
Yeah.
it was really nice. And we promoted it for a full year thereafter, and I was in charge of that committee, and it was really a great experience.
Think about that. So one of my favorite things, so if I'm in Bloomington and I'm driving and coming through Morton on 74, and let's say it's about 8 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night, and you see the skyline of Peoria. It's like one of my most proud moments of living here. Is you see it and you go, that is just one cool skyline. That's like it's a big city.
Yeah.
And then, but the bridge, and you see the bridge and now it's lit up. And boy, is it beautiful.
Yeah.
And there's a cost to that.
Yep.
And you were part of those fundraising efforts, or at least I think you led the fundraising efforts.
Yeah.
Or one of them.
Yeah, and so the effort was really, there were three of us that were intricately involved in that at the start, and that was Leonard Marshall, who was president of now Chase Bank at that time, and then D. James Jumer, and then myself, and basically we raised the money. I got individual people and businesses to sponsor each light, and there were actually 256 lights on the bridge, and each one had a name. And actually on the Peoria side, we have a kind of a monument that has the names of each sponsor of each of those 256 lights. And so I was, running that part of it. And so I had Leonard Marshall as number one, D. James Jr. as number two, and then myself and my whole family, including my kids, were number three on it. Yeah, but other people stepped forward, and it was just a thing to have pride in the community. And again, what you're saying is that it is a prideful moment coming over from East Peoria to Peoria and seeing the lights on the bridge. And it's certainly they've done a great job now in adding multiple colors and different bulbs. Yeah, I love that too. Yeah.
So we've got a few minutes left. I want to talk about. There's a lot of people that don't know you as an attorney. There's a lot of people that know you as a basketball coach.
Yeah.
And so you started the AAU program, the Peoria Irish. I don't think players coming up, young players, they may not realize that, but that program's big.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and so the Peoria Irish is something that I started, and it was just a way of giving kids a chance to get involved in playing at a higher level. Certainly there's all sorts of house leagues, and that's great, to have your child participate in that. But if those who are serious about basketball and really playing AAU is really what they need to do. So at one time, my Peoria Irish programs were playing in a thing called the AYBT, American Youth Basketball League, and they had a national that took place at the Unidome at the University of Northern Iowa. And in sixth grade, I had a team that went undefeated, and they were sixth graders, and we actually played in the high school bracket at the tournament, and we won it. And I said, we need to move on to a different level. And so we moved on then to AAU and really kind of build up a program where we had teams for various ages. I would generally coach the team. And the last year that I went to the National, and Disney kind of realized what a great opportunity there was with AAU. So they have a facility called the Wide World of Sports, and all the AAU Nationals now are held there. As I was kind of moving up throughout it, Detroit would have one national, Ohio would have another national.
Scattered.
It's scattered. And now all the high school levels, eighth grade on up, are all held at Disney. And there'll be thousands of teams actually will come. And so, the last team that I had there, we had 24 teams from Illinois that qualified, and you have to qualify to go to the Nationals, and there were 1,700 teams at that National, and out of the 24 Illinois teams, we were the only one that finished. The top 24 get recognized, and my team finished in the top 20, and we won our last 6 games. And in our last 6 games, we did not see a Caucasian on any opposing team. Most of my teams were pretty well equally mixed between African Americans and Caucasians, but that year I had 2 African Americans that were hurt and couldn't play. One had surgery, the other one was with us but couldn't dress. And we had 8 Caucasians and 1 African American, and we won all of our last 6 games. We ended up finishing in the top 20, and we actually played 4 future NBA players at that National.
How many players have gone through? You've seen thousands.
Yes, thousands and thousands. But in terms of my program, over 100 kids that I personally coach have played college basketball.
Think about that.
Yeah, and a number at D1 level, and I had 2 that played in the NBA. that I coached. And
Name
one,
a couple of them.
well, Alec Peters,
Okay.
who's from
Oh, he's
Washington.
tough.
Yeah, and he's all-time leading scorer and rebounder at Valparaiso. Played for Phoenix Suns, averaged about 15 minutes his rookie year, making $750,000, and then got a chance the next year to go over and play in the top European.
He played in Russia or something, didn't
Yeah, he was the MVP of the top European league playing for Russia, and they won the league, and he was the leading scorer and the leading player. And a lot of those leagues over there will have a 1 or 2 USA player limit. So the first thing they're looking for, you could be a mediocre 7-footer and maybe have a chance to play, but they look for an Alec Peters or Mitchell Anderson, who played at Bradley, had a successful career over there. Yeah, after being in the NBA for a while. And in the end, if you can do it all, you can score and do it all. And Alec Peters is a tremendous shooter. And it got to the point where it wasn't safe to play in Russia and be from the United
Then he
States.
moved over?
Yeah, so he's still playing over there in the same league, but he's playing
out of
for,
Russia.
Yeah, not in Russia.
All right. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show. This was fun. I mean, you and I could probably talk sports alone for about a full day, but I appreciate you coming on, Jim Rochford, Rochford and Associates. I'm Matt George, and this is another episode of Business Forward.
Thanks for tuning in to Business Forward, brought to you by PNC. PNC Bank, National Association, member FDIC.